Thanks to today's sponsor, Cast AI. Cast AI is a Kubernetes cost monitoring and management platform that reduces cloud costs by over 60%. Cast AI likely has the fastest autoscaler on the market, and it's really good at scaling down due to Invictor. You can benefit from automated node selection and spot instances with fallback to on-demand. It's a top-notch Kubernetes automation platform with free cost monitoring and cost optimization modules. Optimize your first cluster for free by going to cast.ai/Bret Fisher. Thanks, Cast AI, for supporting this show. Hello and welcome to my show. I'm glad you're here. I am riding solo today because Nirmal couldn't make it. He's got some new stuff going on in his life and I wish him well. And today we won't see him, but maybe next week. I haven't actually looked at the schedule, so we're going to have to look at the schedule to see who's coming up this month on the live show. Of course, if you haven't been here before, every Thursday, blah, 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 always live on Thursday afternoons, 1 o'clock U.S. Eastern, whatever that means in your time zone. So I'm glad you're here. If you're not watching this live, come back on Thursdays. You can ask questions of our guests. Today is going to be all Q&A. I've got a few things I showed off in the newsletter yesterday. In case you are not aware, there was a newsletter that you can find out about everything that's happening on this show, all the stuff on the podcast, what content I'm working on, where I'm speaking, where you can see me at conferences. All that stuff's happening over on the newsletter. Let's show what that looks like. That's Bret.news. Nice and easy. Bret.news right there. Now, the last couple of weeks, I've been talking about my DockerCon talk, Node.js in Docker, and my tips. And so this week, I listed, a pretty short, like maybe 15 items on a production container pro tips for people using Node.js. Now, most of those tips are actually usable regardless of your language, but I do like Node.js. It's one of the languages I know, so I talk a little bit about that at DockerCon. So we'll get into that in a minute. But Bret.news, go sign up for that while you're listening to me chat, and you will know what's going to be on the podcast, what's going to be on the live show, what special guests, like we just had Solomon Hykes, the founder of Docker, on. Was that 2 weeks ago or last week? The weeks are flying by, so I don't remember exactly which week, but I think it was last week. And we had him on for Dagger, and that was a lot of fun. So that podcast is coming out soon. If you want to know all the updates, get on the free newsletter. Thanks for everyone for being here, by the way. Martin, I appreciate you for being, I need like a ranking of the most reliable, consistent people on the show, just hanging out in chat. Eric's here, of course, one of the many regulars. Tomas, we've got, who else we got? Caesar, what's up? Bolivia, nice. We got Netherlands, Bolivia. We've got Texas here. I'm in Virginia. Where's everybody else from? It's always a worldwide audience here on YouTube, so it's a lot of fun. All right, so the rules of these Q&A shows is that you come with questions. I hopefully have good answers. Maybe someone else in chat will have answers as well. And so I learn stuff on these shows. That's why I do them, is to help you, but you help me. And there's so much stuff to know out there about cloud native and containers and DevOps that we can't, any one of us, all know it all. And usually my goal is to not necessarily know everything, but for any one thing to know who knows that thing. And I can reach out to them and ask those questions. So maybe you're one of those. Maybe you're a pro on a particular cloud platform. Maybe you're a Terraform pro, or you've learned all the latest Kubernetes 1.1000, whatever version that you are on today. Maybe you're an expert on that. So I'm glad you're here. We also have a community you can see right up there. I should have like a little thing that like comes up and points to that little URL up there. All I got is sounds. All I got is sounds today. I need to up my live stream game. So over at Discord, you can find our server. We've got over 16,000 people in there, and it's a great time. I'm there all the time, answering questions in my courses. Hey, did you know I have courses? Of course you do, because I always talk about my courses, and they're in the waiting intro, so you should know about those courses. But the community is a lot more than just the courses. So over here, you can see what it looks like, just to prove that this thing exists. And the nice thing about our Discord server, besides the constant community chat, and I can never keep up, this is just in the last couple of days, and we also have events. So it's kind of like a calendar of what's going on the Discord server. And this is where my community lives. So if you're not there, go up there, sign up, and you can see like what's happening now, the live stream each week. So it's another way that you can add it to your calendar here. You can actually make sure you don't miss it. I have to put these kind of things on my calendar or I would miss them too. So we've got a Swarm Fans meetup tomorrow. So 2 streams, 2 days in a row. Technically, this Swarm Fans is not going to be here on YouTube, so you have to be in the Discord server. Again, of course, it's free. You can go in the Discord server and you can be a part of our Swarm Fans meetup. And if you have questions on Swarm, if you're one of the sort of precious few of us still running Swarm on our small little clusters and that we don't need all the complexity of Kubernetes, you definitely want to hit that up, because sometimes we get maintainers. We definitely get groups of people that are using Swarm in production today. So if you have questions, come over to that. And that is tomorrow around this time. It's actually an hour earlier at 12 o'clock my time, US Eastern. So it's an hour earlier in the day, but show up for that. And you can too be on camera, ask your questions, and we can promote you essentially to ask questions, be a part of the conversation if you want to know something, or if you have some Swarm experiences that you just want to share. Or maybe it's a Swarm tool. We actually have a new Swarm Awesome list that Martin and I, we co-host this meetup, and we also keep track of any projects that are creating new storage drivers for Swarm, or new automation tools, like maybe auto-deploying Swarm stacks and stuff like that, maybe GitOps related. So there's still tools out there. There's not a ton of them, nothing like Kubernetes. We can actually keep it all in one list. And if you're interested in any of that, just show up tomorrow. And then we have the high fivers. That's actually happening close to Christmas. The high fivers is, oh, by the way, we have a high fiver in this group. We just got a new high fiver. Where's that chat? Show me the chat. Oh, it went away. All right, we have, if you're the person who signed up, it's not showing up in my interface now, probably because I had to re-log in to Chrome, and it's no longer showing. But if you're the one that signed up for high fivers earlier today, thank you. You get the reggae horn. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, high fivers rock. High fivers rocks. So we do this once a month where the high fivers get to hang out, and it's basically just a Zoom hangout, but we do it in Discord because Discord's more fun than Zoom. So we do it there. And sometimes there's 3 of us, sometimes there's 8 of us. It just kind of depends. And I honestly feel like I should be promoting this more. It's only $5 a month to get in. And we talk about the projects we're working on. We talk about life as a DevOps engineer, or a programmer that's having to do DevOps, even though they maybe don't want to. And the topics are great. I always learn something there. This is not a group of people that are learning DevOps. This is more, although you're welcome. I mean, you're welcome to come. All are welcome. But there's a lot of practitioners in there, senior engineers that have been around forever, people my age with a little bit of gray, or more than a little bit, in their beard. And it's a large mix of people. So I encourage you, sign up here on YouTube, or sign up on my website, or sign up on Patreon, or wherever you can find me. That's the High Fivers group. We meet every month, and we're meeting on the 20th. So you have been warned. You've got a couple of weeks until that happens. Yeah. So let's get to it. All right. Hello, everyone. Akshay, what's up? Hopefully I'm pronouncing that somewhat correctly. let's talk about some security stuff, some container stuff. I have in recent years, like a lot of the industry, I've been starting to shift a lot of my conversations to always include security stuff related to containers. And I've kind of always done that. In fact, my whole career, I've tried to be the person in the team that was the best friend with the security team. Like, if there's a security team and I'm in server engineering or DevOps engineering or whatever team that I'm in, ops, I want to be the closest connection to the security team. Because the reality is, in the old days, let's go back a day. Let's go back some time. Let's think about 2005. So in the world of 2005, when we didn't have DevOps yet, and I was in ops, and we had developers as a separate group, and I was trying to be the developer's friend, but I was in the ops and sysadmin team, and I was trying to be the security team's friend. And I learned that you get things done by making friends, not by making enemies. And a lot of times, before we had DevOps, there was adversarial throwing things over the cubicle, as we would say. There was a little bit of tension between the groups. And so I always thought of it as my goal, especially when I was team lead, to be the person who made the bridge of relationships between the teams so that we all realize we're doing the same thing. We're all trying to stay safe as possible while also shipping fast as possible. And I enjoyed it because it was a lot of times it was a refreshing change that they had not experienced in the past, because sometimes ops had issues with everyone else messing with their stuff. Every time the developers wanted to deploy something, we were worried they were going to break our servers or cause an outage, and then it would be our fault. So we didn't always see eye to eye, but I always felt like it was the same team. It was just one large team of a bunch of different people all pushing software into production and keeping it safe. So all those years ago, I was getting certificates for security security certificates or trainings and accreditation. So, for example, SANS. SANS is a great organization. I can't talk today. SANS.org, if you've ever heard of that. I honestly think they're one of the best out there. There are definitely other organizations, other institutions, but SANS has been around for decades, and I was blown away in the early 2000s by the quality of their training. And I've met security engineers throughout my career since then that still teach for SANS. They are definitely one of the gold standards of the industry. And I remember in maybe 15 years ago going for my SANS certificate of security on Windows Server and having to write a paper and basically have it judged and have sort of an interview type of experience in order to get my certification. And so it was way different than just taking a test. It was actually other people having conversation with me, grading my work. And it was a ton of fun. It was a ton of work. It actually felt more like university than it did a typical security certification. I learned so much through that program. And one of the things I learned was security people are awesome. And I wanted to always be close to them. So when you go and look at some of the stuff that I've done on GitHub, I can't spell GitHub today, you'll see that a lot of my examples include security-related stuff because I feel like it's every engineer's job to be adjacent to the security team and their objectives. So you need to know what their goals are and help them achieve those goals. You will not only be a friend to the security team, but you'll also be a better engineer, because you don't want to be the engineer in the team that shipped that insecure code, or you added more vulnerabilities to the code because you included some module in your app that wasn't the latest version, or it maybe had a security vulnerability in it. You don't want to be that person. You don't. Trust me. I have been that person, and I try never to be that person again. But if you look in here, what do we got? I'm just going to go down this list real quick. So I've definitely got stuff in here in the Node.js rocks. But I've also got other stuff. Like even if you go into my my GitHub Actions DevOps templates, I have security scans for scanning for vulnerabilities inside of my GitHub builds of my Docker images. And then I've got little things like making sure that TLS is turned on your local development, so you can use Docker Compose and something like Traffic to just automatically give you TLS for all your web development and web apps so that you don't have to worry about all of the different struggles that some frameworks give you if you're trying to develop an HTTP. So that is a really easy thing to use. I use that one a lot myself, and I give it to my clients and to my students. And then, let's see what else we got here. I know we got a few more that are security related. My Kubernetes pod specification, which is pretty popular. Only got 60 stars, but people use it. I get good feedback, and I have gotten feedback from other security and Kubernetes engineers on what I think is the default template you should have in a Kubernetes pod. For deployments or whatever type of resource you're going to build, the pod is always the way you run that container. And the sad examples on the internet aren't sufficient. I don't use them. I use this. This is literally what I copy and paste every time I want to create a pod spec, because I always want to keep all of my security features enabled. I want to not run as root. I want to make sure I can't escalate privileges, which is often, a lot of times in production environments, a requirement. So you have to do that. I want to make sure I have my probes, or at least one of the 2 probes. I want to have some resource limits in place, maybe not all of them, but at least something in there. And of course, you're going to do things like establish your ports and your volumes. So that stuff all tends to happen. We also have things like the grace period for shutting down your app, which you should know, and you probably don't want the default. You might want something a lot longer depending on how your app shuts down properly. And then seccomp. Seccomp is a thing that comes free with Docker. It enables Kubernetes to use, well, Docker and Kubernetes, if you use seccomp, which is a Linux kernel feature, it's basically a package that disables and enables kernel features and kernel syscalls. And Docker, many years ago, like a decade ago, they created a profile that's the default profile. It's always enabled in Docker, but it's not always enabled in Kubernetes. So I make sure that it's turned on by default. Why not? We know that almost all cloud normal server apps will work with this profile that basically turns off a whole bunch of security features in the kernel that you don't need. Unnecessary system calls is something that we should be blocking for most of our apps, just in case there's a new kernel vulnerability that's exploitable through those system calls. We won't have to worry about it because we're already locking it down. So this spec is what I use by default. It's always worked for me. I've never had an issue with it, and I try to keep it updated. For example, what was the latest thing that we added? I think we added this a couple years. I added this maybe a year or 2 ago, and then because this wasn't always there, and then we can now technically do that seccomp in the entire cluster by default. So you don't do that in the pod spec. Just go over to the Kubernetes website, look in the docs for seccomp. You'll find some recent blog posts this year about how to make seccomp on by default across your cluster. I recommend that, but that's just not a pod spec thing. That's a cluster-wide thing. And there's now a couple of more features that I'm going to be looking to add in here as well that have come out in recent versions of Kubernetes. So stay tuned to that. The way you want to know what happens here is you go up here. Let's see, we're under the watch, and maybe just set it to all activity because I don't change this very often. If you look, the last time it was edited was 10 months ago. So it won't update very often. You won't get a lot of spam, but go in there. And I'll put this link in chat for all of you in chat. Ooh, Eric's throwing down some security knowledge because he works at Sneak, so he definitely knows what's going on. Yeah, it was Jimmy Jazz. Jimmy Jazz. Thanks, Eric. Wrong button. Jimmy Jazz gets the reggae horn. Thanks, Jimmy Jazz. That's a great name. Jimmy Jazz. Just fun to say. Yeah, PSA restricted requires many of these settings. Yeah, there's especially my first experience with a lot of these settings was actually years ago with a national bank that was standardized on Kubernetes, but whatever app you wanted them to run, they would run it in their data center as long as you could run it in a pod, but they would not allow you to have things like you couldn't have privilege escalation, you couldn't run as root, you had to have your user ID specified, you had to have a lot of these things all specified, resource limits, and you couldn't even get in their front door before you had to have all that stuff, and you had to give them basically your pod spec before they would even try to run your app. So there's a lot of things there. There's a lot of stuff going on there. So I try to give you comments, and you can find the templates and more in that URL. Oh, thank you, Eric, for the link to that. But I didn't want to talk about the pod spec today. Again, if you're just joining us, I'm here for questions. Docker questions, Kubernetes questions, DevOps questions, container questions. That's why I'm doing this today. So throw those in chat. And then the thing that I actually wanted to talk about was in my newsletter. So if we go over to the newsletter this week, from my Docker for Node.js talk, it's called Node.js Rocks in Docker. I sent that out last week. So that's available on YouTube now from DockerCon. You can go to Docker's page on YouTube. Their channel has my talk. I'm planning on actually taking that talk and commenting on my own talk and then making that a video on this channel. So you'll see that when it happens. But I've got this short list, and I thought we could talk about it. This list is also in this repo. So let me give you the repo so you can bookmark that stuff for later. There are also some updates I want to make to this repo that have happened since the talk. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about is this quick little list. And most of these things are just quick hits. It's sort of a checkoff list of before you take that container image and you put it into production, what things have you done to ensure that it's going to start up and shut down properly, that all the security features are lit up, that are easy to implement. I don't try to do anything extremely esoteric or extremely challenging, like making a custom app armor profile. I don't try to make you do any of that stuff. All this stuff is meant to be doable in a day. And each one of these things shouldn't take you very long to just either make sure that you're doing it correctly, or maybe change that command. Like maybe you're doing your npm CIs or your npm installs rather. Maybe you're just doing a regular npm install, which you should not do for production. You should always do npm CI, and you can do omit dev so that it won't install any developer dependencies. It'll only install basically the default dependencies or the production dependencies. So if you go down this list, the first one is to make sure we're using ChainGuard images. Now, ChainGuard was here on the show last year. We talked about their Woofy project. Woofy is a series of container images. It's actually called Woofy OS, but it's not technically a full Linux distribution. They have created their own Linux distribution that's container only. It's container native, and it's minimal. You think of it as a better Alpine. It uses the standard C libraries that we all know and love from Debian and Ubuntu and other distributions. It doesn't use the Alpine stack of C libraries like Musel. So it's going to be a little more compatible with your applications, because sometimes in Alpine over the years I've experienced problems mostly related to the way that it compiles and runs C code with Musel. So if we look here, we can see there's all these different images. So think of this as like ChainGuard's more secure default equivalent to the Docker official images. And you can go in here, find the node image, and use it for your apps for free. Now, they have limited functionality in terms of how you can pin to that image or versions of that image, because obviously this is very expensive for them to host. So you get some of the stuff out of the box. You can totally use it for free if you pin to the SHA hash. If you don't know what that is, go back to my repo that we just showed and watch those talks. It'll talk about it. The latest one, if we just go over to GitHub, or sorry, to YouTube, and let's just do this. Bret, let's see if this works. DockerCon Node.js 2023. Let's see if YouTube search finds it. Boom. All right, so that very first talk there, that's the one. We'll explain to you about how SHA hash pinning works. And if we go, right here, you can actually see in that video a little bit that what I'm able to do, this is actually a kind of a trick that not everyone knows about, is that when you pin your images, you can pin to a version, but that doesn't mean the image can't get replaced or changed. A lot of times, even with official images, pinning to even specific versions might get a slight update to an image whenever they change or update the base image to keep it more secure. So if you're someone who needs to pin to the exact SHA hash of an image, you can do that. But there's a nice little trick where you can add both of them in the same string. And the way that this works is you can basically, for the humans, they will know that this image that you're froming is node 20, and it's the slim image that is on Bookworm, which is the latest release of Debian. But that actually is ignored by the computers when you specify this SHA hash afterwards. And you can get the SHA hash from your Docker images list. There's actually an option in the Docker images. Let me see if I can get that to come up. Yeah, let me switch over to this. So if you do a Docker images -- digest, you'll get back those SHA hashes that you can then throw in your Docker file of whatever image you're going to use. And so I can make sure that the computers always use that SHA hash. But if this is kind of like a note to the humans that is basically saying, this was the image I am using for my SHA hash. So technically that stuff before the @ sign is ignored, and it's only for friendly human understanding. So you could either do that or just only specify the SHA hash and then maybe make a comment with your hashtags there and just specify in the comment that this SHA hash is from the node 20 Bookworm slim image rather. So that's a nice little trick, right? And if we go back over to this list, so that's the first one. That's actually something that's probably going to take you a little bit of time to figure out your base images there. But that is my go-to nowadays, is the ChainGuard official images there. And of course, this other list should all look familiar to you, making sure that you call your applications directly. Don't run other application launchers, because we don't want a nested execution environment. We don't want Docker to then run npm and then npm runs node. A lot of times what that does is that breaks your kernel signals and causes bad shutdowns. So you don't want to do that. You want to call Python and Node and Ruby directly as much as you can. And then of course you want Teeny processes. A lot of times you will need that. Teeny is basically it's a PID1, it's a process manager, and it helps you reap zombies. And of course this is all stuff, you can watch that in the video. I'm not going to rehash it. But that's the little list for your Docker file. I could make a list 3 times as long, but these are things that I find that a lot of people don't do. So this isn't the everything, everywhere, all at once kind of list. This is just probably things, something on this list that you maybe didn't know about. And then source code, making sure that you're doing certain things in your source code to make it more friendly for running in a container. Now, let's be clear. Almost all apps can run in containers without changing any of their code. But if you're going to try to run in containers with always uptime and easy rolling updates and all that stuff, there are habits that you might need to implement in your programming to make this all go smoother. So I throw you some things there. And then the pod spec. Now that mostly comes from the pod spec page, but I just throw some of the cliff notes here to remind you of some of the stuff that you want to make sure you have in there. A lot of times I will see, let's just say, rarely do I see all these things being used in pod specs for my clients. So I'm always trying to educate people that these all should really be in there. If you don't have them in there, you definitely need a reason for why they're not there. They should be there by default, and if you don't have them, you should know why you can't have them, because these are all things that are going to improve not just the security, but also the reliability of your pods. You have seen that movie? What's up, Conrad? I'm glad you're here today. All right, let's get back to the chat. Is there a tool to help keep pinned Docker SHAs up to date? Andy, that is a great question. So I have not seen a tool. I wouldn't be surprised if someone has a tool out there. I don't know of a very popular tool that does it. The teams that I know that do that, what they're doing is they're writing something like a GitHub action that will go and check for the latest SHA hash of a particular tag, and then they will auto create a PR that just changes the SHA hash. But what I've seen them do is usually a bash script, or whatever their favorite language for automation is. And so they will make a GitHub action for that. That action would actually look a little bit like one that I have that in no way does the same thing, but I'll show you something that's an example that might help get you started there. And if you're in chat and you know of something that will automatically check for SHA hashes, let me know. It wouldn't be that tricky to create something like that. That's actually a really great idea. Oh, and Brandon Mitchell's here. So you've got someone in the chat that's going to have a good answer, because Brandon and I, he's been on the show, another Docker captain, also a core maintainer of some of these tools, he will definitely have something for us, or a tip. I ended up writing my own tool to do it in Go, of course. So perfect. Something that I have for this, it's not specifically solving this problem, but if you're curious about having something running in a GitHub repo that might need to auto create a PR that changes one line of code, I love doing all this in GitHub Actions. So if you go over here, not in my courses, let's go look. Let's see if I can find it. I'm not sure if it's in here. This might be it. Call build on push. Yeah. So this is actually how easy it can be sometimes. Is this is not exactly what you're looking for, and someone else might have something better in chat. But what I'm going to give you this link in chat for is, this is something that runs inside of a GitHub action. And I have a course on GitHub Actions, so look inside my GitHub for the link to my course on GitHub Actions. You can sign up on the waiting list for that. And in GitHub Actions, what happens is when I build an image, I will use these few steps that actually takes me to the reusable GitHub's PR, reusable GitHub action. So let's go over to that. And I'll show you the steps, basically the general steps for how you change code or YAML from somewhere else. And so in here, we'll skip past all the inputs, and the real work is essentially, imagine you had something running every week, and it's running, you can actually set up at the top of a GitHub action on the workflow up here, you can actually create one that runs on like a cron schedule, once a day, once a week. And it could go check. You could have a couple of steps that go look for a new SHA and matches it to an existing SHA. In this one, what this actually does is it checks out the repo that has that real YAML with the SHA, so it technically can be a different repo. And then in this case, what I'm doing is I'm actually editing the YAML of a Kubernetes customize deployment, and I'm going in and changing the image tag that the pod is going to deploy. So it's essentially the same thing as what you're saying. You just need to change a Docker file, assuming you have a Docker file. You could also have this, instead of changing a Docker file, if you're someone who maybe pens your MySQL or you pen your Nginx installs, you could also have something like this that edits your Kubernetes deployments, and you could just have a one-liner that edits what you need to use. In this case, I'm actually using a tag, not the SHA hash, but it wouldn't be much different. And then I use Peter Evans, who makes some great GitHub actions. He has an action that will let me go and create a pull request in a different repo to make that one-line change. So the idea here is that you could have this robot in GitHub Actions once a week going and comparing the two SHAs, and then if it sees a difference, it will make a pull request on that repo wherever your Docker file or your Kubernetes YAML lives. And it doesn't have to auto merge it. It can just create the PR for humans to review. And then at the end, of course, it will tell the team in Slack, hey, I got a new PR to update this image version. So that's something that I have today that just updates the image version based on the image I just built. And this is for a typical CI workflow. But you could change this, 100 lines of YAML. You could change that with very little effort, probably, to just focus on the SHA hash and maybe do a Docker pull, or as bmitch has. bmitch has some tools that could probably make it a little bit easier. Yeah. So we have a repo, reg client. And this is a tool that I sometimes use. We've actually had bmitch on the show. Sudo bmitch has been on the show in years past talking about this, and we actually go through it. Let me see if I can find that real quick. There we go. So this show right here, if you're curious about Brandon's tools, Brandon's got a live show. When did we do that? 2 years ago. Okay, we need to do another one. 2 years ago. My goodness, that was too long ago. All right, go check out that YouTube video later. You can find out about some basically, one of the great things about these tools he's creating for registry access is you don't have to pull down images to find out information. So you might be able to use that. Let me go back to chat here and see if I'm going to catch up in all this. That's a great question. Great conversation, Andy. Thanks for asking that. Dan, you're up next. I see your question. We'll come back to that. Content security policies. Niall, tell me more. Tell me. Oh, okay. I see. You got more in here. Okay, I'll come back to your question in a minute. Ooh, Eric thinks that Argo CD may be able to automate this for you. That's interesting. I'll have to check that out. I'm a big Argo CD fan for deploying your containers on Kubernetes, keeping all the stuff you have in Git synced with your cluster. Argo is great for that. Oh, Conrad was saying, I'm sorry, going back to the previous conversation, Conrad was talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once. That was a great show, great movie. I love that movie. I need to watch it again. I've only seen it once. There was a lot going on in that movie. The image updater does it. Yeah, so, and one of the things the Argo CD plugin called the Argo CD image updater, one of the things that can do as well is it goes and looks at your image repo for new SHA hashes or new regexes of image tags. And then optionally, it can go and retroactively update the GitHub repo where you've got your YAML stored as code specifying the version. So that could definitely be an option there. I forgot about that. Thanks, Eric. All right, Andy, I'm going to ask. I see your pinned Debian dependencies. I'll come back to that. Yeah, definitely. Dan's saying Argo CD recommends source code and YAML should be in separate repos. I generally agree. I think that it's great to put Docker files and maybe compose files in the repo with your source code, but I always put Kubernetes YAML in a different repo. Typically, because that even if you're just one person, you don't necessarily want to cloud up your, you don't want to muddy the waters of I've got code changes in my application and then I've got deployment changes for how that thing runs in my environments. And you're probably going to have multiple environments. So I don't want to make all those changes in the code repo. I'd rather have that somewhere else so I can have easier control of different people that have permissions to change production, right? So I don't want to have to do a whole lot of work to control directory permissions and all that in a single repo. Even if you have a mono repo of all your apps and subdirectories, I still recommend that YAML in a separate repo. And I actually teach this in my GitHub Actions course where there's sort of 3 different styles. You can have everything in one repo, and there's certainly negatives to that, but obviously the convenience of everything in a repo. If you're a single person, you may want to put it all in a single repo, but I still don't do that. For myself and my own little projects, I still have 2 separates. You could actually go to 3, where you have your application in a Docker file, you have your customize or your Helm chart, and then you have your Argo CD GitOps YAML, all in 3 separate repos. I don't always separate them out in 3 separate repos, but there's definitely multiple models of where all the YAML lives. I always start out with my YAMLs in a single repo, and then as the need arises, I will split some of it out to other repos based on security or organizational requirements and stuff like that. So that's a great conversation, Dan. Thanks for bringing that up. Oh, so Brandon's got a version bump. Version bump. Let's check that out. Let's see if I typed that right. Version bump. Bumps the versions embedded in different files of the project. This is run without needing a cloud-hosted Git repo for a SaaS to submit PRs. This works with versions embedded in scripts, make files, config files, YAMLs, Docker files. Yeah, with a regular expression. Nice. We're going to have to talk about that. It has been too long. We're going to talk about that on the show someday. All right. I'm going to ping you offline, Mitchell, and we're going to...
The front door was open.
Oh, the front door was open.
Please enter your passcode.
My Google is talking to me. All right. What's next? What's next on the list? When is the Argo CD Mastery Udemy class? So right now, I don't have plans to put my GitHub actions on Udemy. If you want to, right now the plan, what is the plan? Let me get the URL here. So right now, the plan is I am hosting this on Maven, and it's a live course. And that's weird. The dates say that class is in session, but that is not true. We are not in session right now. I need to fix that. But go sign up for the next cohort. Basically, get on that mailing list. There's not really any spam. There's just a couple of emails that come through asking you what you're looking to learn. And if I ever release a fully offline, self-paced course of this stuff, I will let all you know if you're on that list. So jump on that list. I put the link in chat, and I basically teach 2 things. We teach GitHub Actions for how to build and test your containers, and then all the automation required for Argo CD to work. And then we teach how to deploy to Kubernetes clusters in any environment using Argo CD from GitHub. Okay, so you could take this course, even if you're not a GitHub user. If you're using GitLab or something else for your Git storage, you could learn GitHub Actions and learn the steps and basically the process that we go through, and then translate that into a lot of other tools. And of course, GitHub Actions is now becoming kind of a standard. So there's a lot of other tools and other products out there. Even Dagger is building tools for Dagger was just on the show the other day. They're like a futuristic CI that can run anywhere, including your local machine. And Dagger will allow you to use GitHub Actions. So this is pretty flexible. And then, of course, Argo CD for the GitOps portion. I think it's the best way to deploy all your applications on Kubernetes. So go check that out. Just get on the list. Again, you'll only get a few emails from me, and then you'll find out either when I'm going to have another live course, which is we've done this twice, and we've taught 2 different cohorts of people this year. And then if I plan to do a non-live version, maybe on Udemy, maybe somewhere else where you get all the videos and all of the assignments for all this stuff, I will definitely and certainly tell the people on that list in case they want to do that. Because I know not everyone can afford or attend a live training, because it's in the middle of my day, not in the middle of your day. So I understand that. So get on the list and you'll know. Yes, thanks, Dan. I've had a lot of requests for that. So it's just a matter of, it's probably 10 hours of video. And so it would take me some time to do that. And this live course allows me to do a portion of it with videos and a portion of it live. And I do have those recordings, but they're not really great for just watching later because it's hours worth of content without all the assignments and whatnot. So if I was going to host it somewhere else where it was just a video course, not a live course, I would have to re-record a lot of that stuff. So I definitely want to do it. If I'm going to do a new course on Udemy, it's going to be something like this because GitHub Actions and Argo are my two favorite topics of the year. Besides, of course, AI, everything. Jimmy, real quick, that's a quick question with a quick answer, hopefully. The difference between DevOps or SecDevOps and DevSecOps is, in my opinion, it's the name. That's it. Whatever the team decides in the order of the terms, you could argue that a security team might want to put their name first. I have never worked with any team that calls it SecDevOps. It's always been DevSecOps. Usually the teams that do the DevSecOps are DevOps people that also incorporate all of the security functionality and features, and they sort of give themselves the responsibility of making sure that their DevOps is secure, and we call it DSO. We actually just break DevSecOps because that's too many syllables. DSO, shorter. Actually, it's the same number of syllables, I guess, but easier to say. If someone else has an opinion on that, please throw that in chat. I have not run into a team that calls themselves SecDevOps. So good question, Jimmy. Let me go back to the questions that we missed. Dan's asking, I have to run an install script that I need in a container with secrets like creating a conf server XML in Tomcat. Do I mount secret certs during the build or use a script and run and do a multi-stage build? So in this case, without me knowing exactly that XML file or the secrets, if you have a secret, my assumption is that secret is environment specific. Meaning that if you run something on your local machine, you maybe need a different secret, or you don't even need the secret. But if you're running in production, you might need that secret specifically for production. If you have a staging, it might be the same secret, or it might be a different one. But those secrets should be injected at runtime, not at build time. So those secrets need to live in a file that lives on your Kubernetes cluster as a Kubernetes secret resource, and those are mounted in either as environment variables or as files at runtime, so when the container boots up, it sees the file where it needs it. That is the container way. We don't want these, if this file is needed during build in order for the thing to finish building. I have seen this in the past where legacy applications pre-container have build checks that basically will fail if they don't see a certain config file with a secret. What I will do normally then is I will have that YAML file, or in your case, the XML file. I will have that pre-built, stored as a secret in my clusters, probably also stored in Vault or wherever you keep all of your secrets in production or in your cloud. You might be using AWS secrets. And that production one is stored there. And then I have sort of a dummy one that's stored in the image for ease of use for local development or staging. Basically, that secret in there is not really a secret. It's maybe not even something that even works. And so that's something that I'm okay with keeping in the image long term. It's really just there as a dummy password. So you can imagine if it was maybe a database password or something, you would have, my password would be the one that you would use for development. And that could live in the image. That's okay. You might have to actually flag it in your security tools so that they know not to warn you that they see a secret in there, because it's not really the secret. But you're always going to replace that file in production. And that's how that would work. If you have any other questions on that, I'm happy to come back to that topic, Dan. So let me know on that. Niall, let's talk about trying to set up content security policies and header filters. Tried adding it to Ingress in Argo CD using ALB. It didn't help. HTTP or Nginx might help. That's a pretty specific problem. I'm not sure I have an answer for that. I don't know if anyone else in chat has an answer for that. Yeah. I mean, so the CSP is specific to your application. So I'm not if is there a reason why that can't go in the app? I'm not actually sure. Maybe it needs to be part of the routing policy for your load balancer, your HTTP proxy. And of course, implementing it in the proxy is always going to be highly dependent upon that proxy and how it does it. Hey, Martin, what's up? Always missing the start. Always late. Always late. But you won't be late tomorrow. Because tomorrow, just for those of you that haven't been here this last hour, tomorrow we have our Swarm fans meetup. So, if you want to learn more about Swarm, if you're curious about the experiences of people using Swarm, if maybe you're thinking that Swarm is right for you because you don't need Kubernetes, come check out our Swarm fans meetup. It's free on our Discord server. So just go to that Discord link and then click on events. You can actually add this to your calendar, just like all the stuff, including our live shows every week, the high fiver chat that we do every month where you get to hang out with a bunch of DevOps professionals. Those are all in the Discord server. So that's where you should be hanging out when I'm not live or when, other cloud native people aren't live. By the way, we've got a lot of other people besides myself in the cloud native community that are maybe CNCF ambassadors, Docker captains. A lot of them have YouTube channels now. So I've been thinking of maybe making a list of like all of them, specifically for YouTube content, because obviously we've got lots of blog content, but I feel like Twitch and YouTube, whether they're live streaming or making videos, it's always great to get it from captains and ambassadors because these people are doing the work. You know that they're learning and implementing the stuff that they're learning, and that they're not just someone who part-time does DevOps. Usually these people are very, very active. That's how they get to be cloud native ambassadors or Docker captains. So to me, that's a quality control. So anyone who's in the ambassador program with the CNCF or with Docker's captains program, I would really sort of trust them by default and what they're saying, because they're usually speaking at conferences. They're usually doing stuff on the internet. And I've been thinking about making a list of all of them because it continues to grow. If you go over here to my channel, you can actually see later what you can do is you can scroll all the way down the bottom. And I try to keep a list. I don't know if it's a complete list, but we've got DevOps Toolkit. That's Victor Farsig, another Docker captain. He's in there. He's also now a recent cloud native ambassador like myself. We've got David Flanagan over at Raw Code Academy doing great work. He also does advanced Kubernetes stuff. We've got Sid over at DevOps Directive, who also does more than just Docker and Kubernetes. I think he has a Terraform course. Maybe it's Ansible. I always get those confused in terms of what he does. He might do both. We got James over at Dive Into, another great resource. He does great high quality videos. I'm always envious of his videos. Of course, we've moved past. We've got Kube Simplify as well. That's another great channel with lots of content. We got Tech World with Nana, which you can't see because my head's in the way. Tech World with Nana. We've got, that's about it. Well, and Matt Williams right here, a former co-host on this show, but now he's doing Olama. And if you haven't learned about LLMs with Olama and Docker and Kubernetes and all that stuff, it's pretty slick. And we're going to have him on the show to talk about Olama with all your container stuff for basically running your own ChatGPT-like experience on your local machine with free open source tools. So we're going to have him on the show from Infra. And yeah, Layer 5, run by another Docker captain. That's all about service mesh. And if you're into service mesh or you want to learn about that, go check them out. I mean, there's just so many great channels. But let's get back to the chat. Let's get back to that. Andy's saying, Dan, if you definitely need the secret at build time, then there's a flag in the mount syntax, which will keep the secret out of the build. Yes, that's a great pro tip, and something that's been in my recent newsletter on. Let me go back on my newsletter here. A recent newsletter I had was Docker front ends. And I'm going to do a show on this. We need to talk more about it. I want to do a video on it. Did I miss it? I've probably missed it. Oh, your Docker file is outdated. I didn't actually put the word front ends in the title. So I have this blog post to follow up on Andy's great comment. And there are new features coming every year to the Docker file format. And you maybe didn't know that. And the way that that works is something called Docker file front ends. So for years now, instead of Docker forcing us to all use a different syntax in our Docker files, the Docker file is technically completely backwards compatible if you use those features from 10 years ago that we all know, the standard from, run, in envs, the CMD down at the bottom, ports, there's a basic like 10 commands. But there's new enhancements coming out every year just about. And I have a whole blog post that summarizes a lot of what's going on there and to help you get started with learning the new things. And the way that you do that is with a simple little line at the beginning of your Docker file. That adds the syntax here so that you basically are telling Docker, go download the latest version of the Docker file front end, as we call it, the Docker file API, essentially, for how I do commands in the Docker file. And then I can add a whole lot of new things. And I kind of add my favorites down here at the bottom after I explain a lot of it. I show you how in certain versions we get new features. Like the latest feature is in the add, which we don't use that often, but if you need to download something from the internet into your Docker file for your Docker image, you can now use add for Git URLs directly, which saves you all this time of having to, apt install Git, and then later you probably want to remove Git and all of its dependencies so it's not bloating up your image. So then you have to add Git, download your files, and get rid of Git after the fact. And that usually takes like 5 or 6 lines of code at least. And it sucks. We've also got Link, which is it's not that new. It's a couple years old, but it's rare that I see it. It's not used that often, but it's got superpowers for really speeding up rebuilding your image in case there's something that goes in your image that doesn't need the entire image to be completely rebuilt from scratch. A great example of this is if maybe your app needs a custom root certificate so that it can trust other servers in your data center. Maybe you're an enterprise and you have your own certificate host. And maybe there's this certificate file that's the root certificate or intermediate certificates, whatever you might want to use. And those certificates don't really matter when building the image. You just have to have them in there in order to ship it. But in order to make sure you don't bust the cache of your whole image, you can add this in there, and you can put this at line 3 in your Docker file. And what that will do is if it detects that new file, let's say it's that certificate that it's going to trust, you can copy that in and it won't bust the cache for the rest of the Docker file. So it'll basically turn what could be a 10-minute rebuild of an image just because one file changed. It'll turn that into a couple of seconds to rebuild the whole image. And it's a pretty slick thing, but it doesn't come with Docker files by default. You have to use these front ends. So check that chat out, or that post. I'm going to give it to you. And that's in the newsletter. Again, free stuff on the newsletter. And we're nice enough nowadays. We get sponsors for a lot of our newsletters. So Veritas sponsored this newsletter a couple of months ago. Thank you, Veritas. Appreciate you. And I would love to do a video all about front ends and give you some breakdowns, not of every single change in the last 6 years that we've had since we've had front ends, but maybe the major ones, the ones that I use the most. And maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll do that over the holiday break when I have that free time that we all talk about. Who's got free time? I just realized I don't have my, I do have my sad trombone. Nobody's got free time. Andy's asking, what about pinning Debian dependencies? I had a Docker file pinning versions of Debian packages, but it breaks the whole pipeline when any of them change, which isn't great for our team. Yeah, that's a great question. I go back and forth on pinning those dependencies. I have examples of pinning those dependencies, and I have the same problem. This is a classic example of old package managers, and I'll say old, meaning decades old, pre-container package managers like apt, yum, npm, yarn, gems, all these different package managers for different ecosystems, different distributions of Linux. And a lot of them, even Python, the pip file, they're not great for pinning versions of dependencies that will always work forever and ever. So one of the things that this kind of forces you to do, and you're not going to like this answer, Andy. You're not going to like this. You are so not going to like this. But the way to guarantee this is to build your own apt repository system, store your own dependency packages so that you have them forever. And I've only seen like 2 of my clients over the last decade ever do that. But these are also very large enterprises with hundreds of developers, security focused. They want everything to be, they basically want everything to be reproducible. And we have a growing set of these tools nowadays for reproducible builds. We have Nix. I mean, some of you are huge Nix fans on this show. And I probably at some point should make a little list of the tools that can help you solve this problem that don't require you to host your own Ruby gem server or your own apt package server, your deb package server, because that's just a lot of work. And sure, you could probably use GitHub and you don't have to buy something like JFrog for that, but that's a lot of work. I basically resort to, Andy, the choice is either you do it and you suffer through the pain of the builds, or you don't do it and you have good testing. If you have solid testing for post-image builds where you can verify that the app works, you do at least unit testing, right? That you make sure the health checks pass and that the application has enough testing that you can trust that any of the dependencies won't break the image as long as those tests pass, then you're going to be okay not pinning them. Now, if you're on something like Ubuntu, and this is why I love using Ubuntu as my base image, even though I'm slowly moving all my stuff to ChainGuard, is Ubuntu, they do a lot of work to make sure that those packages are not going to fail. It's not guaranteed. I can actually give you exact examples of how a PHP MySQL driver coming out of apt broke a production application because a certain type of SQL statement didn't work very well, and it may have been a performance problem, or it just may have actually crashed the PHP app. But it was a version change, a minor version, and we didn't pin. This is years ago, but it's still relevant, and it still bit us in the butt. And the only way we would have ever found that before production is if we were doing legitimate. We were actually running all of those classes that did those SQL calls to test performance and functionality and the return data, which is a lot. I mean, a lot of teams, I'll be honest, a lot of teams I work with do not go to that level of testing. So there's that. Now there's maybe this middle of the road where we automate the updating of those. So I would go back, Andy, to the GitHub Actions example. And if I was going to pin to Debian packages or Ubuntu packages, I would then maybe build a little tool or a script that uses apt to go look at the version I have, go look, because you can use the apt cache commands. I think it's like, I'm going to forget this command, but there's a command that you can go and basically look up the current package name. And if the two don't match, or maybe if it's the one you're using is not on the list, which means it will break on the next image update, to automatically make a PR for each one of those. That's basically another tool one of us needs to create in the community to go and basically you cron that out in a GitHub action or in a Jenkins job or whatever, cron that out, have it run every week or every day or whatever, and basically make sure that each one of those still exist so that your images will still keep building. And then if it doesn't build, or if there is a problem, you have a choice there. You can either have it auto PR so that a human can approve it, or you can have it auto create a ticket in your Jira or whatever that basically gives someone work to do to go update that package. So I think there is no perfect solution there. It's work either way. Either you have to really, really trust your automated testing, or you have to suffer through manually updating things when they break, and that really sucks because usually when you're trying to do an app code PR, it sucks to have to then realize that that's going to break. It's not going to work. You go make a new PR to update a package line version in your Docker file, approve that PR, then bring back that commit and from upstream into your current PR branch. It sucks, right? So I'd like to think that all these tools are going to get better and that we're going to have more of this automated version checking. Dependabot can sometimes help, but Dependabot, as good as it is, it'll even check for from updates, and I use it for that. But it doesn't look for, in the run commands of apt packages, it doesn't look for that. So, yeah. Medium, what's up? Thank you so much. Super chat. Thanks for that super chat. Boom. All right. We're going to get to that question in a minute. Let me make sure I've got all the chat caught up here. Medium, I see your question there on dev containers. We'll get to that. You spend your free time with me on Udemy? All right. Yeah, my hundreds of videos. I have now, I think I've got over 40 hours of video on Udemy for those courses. Oh, okay. So Andy is hosting his own app server. Yeah. I mean, that's not great, but it does prevent breakage. Yeah, there's definitely better ways. And I think ChainGuard doesn't even really guarantee for free. They may guarantee if you pay them, but ChainGuard doesn't guarantee that their dependencies that they build, by the way, if you're installing dependencies at the OS level, right? With them, they're using the Alpine package manager, not the apt package manager, but they're using the Alpine one. And they don't guarantee for free that those packages will live forever either. So even if you tried to pin there, you would eventually have failed builds. I know a few places that host mirror their packages too. Kyle, feel free to mention those in chat. Yeah, there's lots of ways to skin this cat. I think that if someone paid me to do it, I would probably build the tool, specifically if we're talking about OS package managers. And if I was concerned about those failed builds, I would probably build the tool that would daily check that in my version of my from image, so it would look at the from image, find that version, create a new blank image, basically it would run a container, look for all those app packages to make sure they still exist in the latest version before I update the from SHA hash, right? Before I update that base image, I'm going to go and check all those app packages that I can parse out of the Docker file. And then if they are, if they don't exist because there's a newer version, maybe I take the latest new version, and this is going to be a fancy tool that doesn't exist as far as I'm aware. And I'm going to make a new PR that day as a robot that essentially says, okay, you're going to update the from image because we need to, because there's a newer from image and it's probably more secure, less vulnerabilities. But in order to do that, you're also going to have to update these apt packages. And I'm just going to push that PR with that Docker file change to that repo that I've checked every day with a robot, and then let a human approve it, look at it. Because if it's a curl version, don't care. If it's a database driver version, if it's a Redis driver version for my PHP or Ruby or whatever, I care. So that's probably going to have to go with most teams that I work with. They're not 100% coverage on their testing, and especially when it comes to functional testing, full front end, back end testing, where they test SQL performance, return data, all that kind of stuff. So if they're not doing all that, it's going to have to be flagged. It's going to have to go to a dev team. And we're just going to have to know that we can't update the from image until we approve all those package changes. So that won't happen for you. Like you won't have these randomly failed image builds if you're pinning your from, right? If you're pinning your from to the SHA hash, you can depend on those package managers existing. I think, gosh, now that I think about it, I might be wrong on that. I think I'm wrong on that. I'm totally wrong on that. Because Ubuntu is going to phase those out regardless of whether I've updated my from image. Yeah, I think. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, it's a problem. It's a known problem. That's why, honestly, nowadays, this is why a lot of us are moving to languages like Go. Because anytime I see an image where a developer has to have OS level packages in order for their application dependencies to work, I don't like it. I know that this is a huge shift in the industry, that we are moving away from, I think we're moving slowly away from OS level packages for developer languages. And we're going to start, like Go, we can bundle all this stuff in. Ideally, we bundle it all in. And maybe if that thing doesn't exist in our language package manager, we are going to have to write it. We're going to, like, if it's something that doesn't exist, maybe we're doing the wrong thing. Maybe we need to rethink our problem to try to avoid those host package managers. But there are just languages. I mean, PHP, Ruby, sometimes Python, sometimes Node.js, rarely with Node.js, I feel like, but it does sometimes happen, where you need these package managers beyond just like basic build tools. You need something very specific. Again, I keep using the database driver example because that's the one that haunted me all those years ago. So that, I think, is an evolution where it's a known problem. And one of the many reasons why the OS package managers are struggling in this world of security is these things keep changing. Now, you could just be one of those people that says, screw it, I YOLO this stuff, and I just build whatever the current thing is and I go. I've seen people do that. But honestly, a lot of times those people, they're using Go. They're using Rust. They're using languages that don't really need much of the host OS to rely on. They don't need a lot of libraries from outside their ecosystem to make it work. So you pick your poisons, right? That's why I see a lot of the teams I work with, even if they're legacy teams using legacy languages, moving to Go, maybe some Rust. I tend to see a lot more Go than Rust with the people I work with. But the two languages that I tend to recommend nowadays. Thank you so much, Medium. All right, let's get to your question. Thanks for the super chat. We are working within monorepo. Each service has a separate dev container configuration. All is well and good apart from source control integration because .git file is in the root directory and we don't want to mount the entire repo. Let me think about that. We are working with a monorepo. Each service has a separate dev container configuration. All right. So you're using like VS Code or something that supports the dev container standard. All is well and good apart from source control integration because the .git file is in the root directory and we don't want to mount the entire repo into your dev container. All right, this is going to be a question for the community because I actually don't know if this is a dev container feature. Because when you're using dev containers, you're mounting the source code. Well, you're either mounting it or you're cloning it into the container directly, right? There's a choice there. So maybe one of my questions, Medium, is could you use dev containers where you're not mounting source code from the host? There's also... Let me see if I can think about another way you might be able to do this. Dev containers. So Docker has a new feature with Compose that copies in, not bind mounts, but copies in all your source code so that you don't have the problem of bind mount performance. Because if you're running on Mac, Windows, you can get away with it if you do everything in WSL. If you're on Linux, go home. Linux desktop people, this is not a problem for you. you can just live a wonderful little life running natively on your Linux host. But if you're on Windows, you're going to do everything in WSL. That means cloning your code into WSL. That means running your commands in WSL. You're just going to do it all there. Forget PowerShell. Like, just don't do that for container stuff. But on Mac, like me, we suffer because we have to bind mount from the Mac OS file system into the Linux file system, and that performance is not great. Docker has a ton of solutions over the years that they've attempted to solve that problem. But their latest one, which is Compose Watch, will copy all your source code in, and you can set up rule sets. So look up Compose Watch, and I haven't tried this, so I don't actually know. But you might be able to use dev containers where your Compose file with dev containers allows you to copy the code in. I'm trying to think. I'm rapidly thinking whether this works or not in my head, thinking through all the dev container stuff and how that works with Compose. But you might be able to have Compose auto copy stuff in so that you don't. Now, the problem with Compose Watch is it's not a two-way sync yet. So if you're changing files inside the container, like people like to do with dev containers, then it wouldn't copy them back out. This might not work. This is a good one. Now, for those that are listening or watching, let's talk about dev container for a minute. I think it's at containers.dev. Yeah, so I'm assuming this is what you're talking about, Medium. Let me know in chat. So this is a great little thing that actually I started talking about in my Node.js for Docker course, but it's continuing to get more features and more tools are supporting it, more editors, more extra functionality with other tools. But there is a specification, and one of the questions is, how can dev containers ignore the .git directory? Especially if you have an old mono repo that's been around a long time and you have, gigabytes of .git. And I've worked with teams that have also had challenges with, they don't really understand how Git storage works with past commits. And sometimes, and I've seen this happen, where a developer accidentally commits like a gigabyte file, and then they realize it's not supposed to be there. So then they delete it from Git in another commit. And kind of like Docker image layers, that doesn't mean the file really goes away ever. So one of the things you might want to do is a shallow clone. That's maybe one idea on your Git, where you can basically do, git clone -- versions and only get so many versions. That way your .git is really shallow and really small, because if you're having performance problems because of the .git, that's one way to alleviate it. That might cause other problems if you have a whole lot of branches and stuff, but I'm trying to think. I'm not sure if I've ever had really any issues with that. Anyway, let me know in chat medium if you have any more questions around that. Sorry, I don't have an immediate answer, because to my knowledge, I've never really had problems with .git in a dev container, so I'm not even sure how it behaves by default. Anyway, someone might have an answer in chat. Let's wait and see. This is the way, Eric. This is the way. We got Grogu right over there. Grogu's with me in the Christmas decorations. All right. What other questions? And by the way, if it's been 10 minutes and I haven't answered your question, I probably missed it. Next up, Nihal. Any interactive quiz links to be interview ready? I don't have that. Nope. I don't really. I haven't done an article or a deep dive into exactly the interview process and how you're going to be interview ready. That's not an expertise I have. I don't really help people prep for interviews, or I do interviews. The teams I work with in my consulting sometimes will invite me in to be a part of hiring a DevOps engineer, for example. And of course, many years ago when I actually worked for big companies, I was usually the team lead that was doing that work. But I haven't done it in recent years. One thing you might want to look up that I can help you with is if you go over to my channel, and 11 months ago, here we go. 5 DevOps skills to boost your job profile. So I'm going to throw this one in chat for you. So I had, oops, nope, don't want to do that. This talk we had, let's see. Yeah, let me throw that one in there. So that YouTube video is my friend Brian Christner came on, and we talked about how he interviews, how he brings on engineers, specifically around DevOps. So if you want to hear it from the interviewers or the hiring manager's mouth, go check out that. We had a whole hour discussion on that with a lot of great questions. That's something I can, but that's not, you're not going to get a list from that. We might give you some resources, but people in chat might be able to help. I don't know if anyone in chat has references for that. All right, next question. Zolt, what's up? How about running apt-get upgrade in Dockerfile after all the apt installs? Specifically, like, do I recommend that? It's really that really depends on your posture. I think I used to, when I would take base images, like let's say I'm running a MySQL server or Postgres or something that I know there's definitely some apt dependencies already in there. I might use their from image, and I might use an apt-get update, right? But that's only going to work if you're the kind of team that doesn't pin your apt versions, or you're okay with the fact that they may change versions. And it depends on your base image. But if you're using something like Ubuntu, you can at least be comfortable that whatever apt dependencies you have, they're not going to change major versions in the same LTS version of Ubuntu. So that's why like when I use Ubuntu, I'm more comfortable in all but one very specific case 8 years ago. I'm very comfortable with the idea of doing apt updates as long as I'm doing some good testing inside my Docker files, and I don't pin the apt dependencies when I'm on Ubuntu, because Ubuntu is going to make sure that there's no major version changes of those apt dependencies. Sometimes that's a little frustrating because you want that major version and it won't give it to you because you have to go find some PPA somewhere that gives you the new versions. But that's a way to sort of guarantee safety, is you're not going to get breaking changes in your dependencies. But other than that, I think it's really the team. The team decides, is this a safe practice for us? And it usually is one of those things where an apt update is fine with everyone. Everyone's fine with it until it causes some production outage. And then it becomes this issue of, how do we deal with updates? Do we do those manually once a month and someone has to manually test? Do we automate the updates? How do we solve this problem with our apt dependencies? And I've seen it all the different ways with different teams. So it's not really, there really is no consensus. I think it's more of a security posture of how you approach updates to your dependencies, including the from image, including the base image. So we got an upvote there. Nicola's got an upvote for Nix. Akihiro has been working on the reproducibility problem. Yeah, and Mr. Mitchell and Akihiro have, I saw this tool, and I saw that talk, and I can't even remember it, showing some options for Alpine package pinning. Let me see if I can find that real quick. DockerCon, because I know they're putting up the DockerCon videos. Reproducible builds. Check this out. Okay. Pop-ups galore. Yes, Medium. I know you suck. By the way, here is my PSA soapbox moment brought to you by Medium. I don't like Medium. Don't use Medium. Stop using Medium. It's got pop-ups. It's got paywalls. It prevents people from getting your information. I know it's easy. I know it's free. But go put your stuff on somewhere like, I don't know, is Dev2 better? Does anyone like Dev2 better than that? I think Dev2 is great. I am just not a Medium fan. In fact, just like Chris Short, I too, Let's see if I can find this tweet. I do have a Medium page, but it's only there for posterity's sake. Okay. Surely I can find this. Let's see if Twitter fails me. Chris Short actually set up a domain recently. Of course you're going to fail me. Yay, Twitter. But basically there is don't use Medium. And you'll see this. All these people don't use Medium. Why Medium sucks? Don't use it. And one of the challenges is it's because of the paywalls. You can't guarantee that everyone can get access to your content. So people sometimes are forced to, pay, and maybe not everyone can pay for the information. So if your intention is to give people information for free, you can't use Medium. You might even just use a Substack, and then it can be in a newsletter format. But anyway, I digress. Let's go back to Akahiro's talk. Does he have a link? Does he have a link? Does he have a link? I'm going to search YouTube. Ooh, here we go. Boom. So from DockerCon, reproducible builds with build kit for secure supply chain. Award winner, Akihiro, from KubeCon, an award winner. I don't know a lot of award winners. It's pretty cool. So let me give you this video. Thank you so much, by the way, Sudo B Mitch. Sudo B Mitch let us in on the reminder that I had forgot that Akihiro did this talk at DockerCon. I wasn't able to attend, but I did watch it after the fact. In fact, I need to upvote that. I need to get that. Like and subscribe, people. Like and subscribe. That's the way this channel survives, is likes and subscribes. I can't even afford to pay my editor to edit these videos with the abysmal ads that YouTube gives me. So that's why we have sponsors. And, thanks to this week's sponsor, Cast AI. Go to check out Cast AI at cast.ai/Bret Fisher. There's an ad in the beginning and the end, and I really appreciate Cast for throwing some money our way so I can afford my editor, and this can turn into a podcast. And that we can have more hosts, or more guests and hosts when Normal comes back. All right, let's get through the questions real quick. I'm going to have to run soon, so let's do rapid fire round. Rapid fire round, people. This is my Thanksgiving sound. Oh, my turkey's gone. Where did my turkey go? I have no turkeys. Pretty soon I'm going to have some Christmas sounds. So we'll up our level of sounds over here. All right, let's see. Got that question. Hey, what's up, Carlos? Conrad's using dev containers with code spaces. Nice. Yeah, code spaces works great with dev containers. Carlos is here. If you have any Argo CD questions, Carlos is the way. All right. Medium is going to clarify the question. Parashiva, yes. I'm glad that someone else. I mean, I understand Medium's mission, and I get that they need to make money as a company. I'm not shaming them for that. But the randomness of being able to get to information or not means that I cannot, in my courses or anything I do, I never give people, if I can afford to, I don't ever give anyone a Medium link to anyone else's content because I don't know if they can get to it. And that sucks. I don't want to recommend something to someone where they think they have to pay to read it. So I don't use it, and you shouldn't either. I love using Ghostblog, ghost.org. They make a great blog engine, and that's how I run my website. Yeah, he is a hero, right? Let's go back to that. Why we need reproducible builds. Docker Hub images are actually reproducible. Yes. So, he's got a much more detailed version of all that stuff. Awesome. We got to get the word out on those SHA hashes, people. All right, Eric's saying that he's gonna watch it too. So we're all gonna come back with lessons learned from Akihiro's talk at DockerCon, supply chain security. I'm a fan of anything supply chain security that I can implement in a day. And a lot of the tools, the techniques, the methods for supply chain security, not all of them, but a lot of the things we can do aren't that big a deal. And it's not just one thing or two things. It's 100 things. But I actually had a talk that I did earlier this year at CIVO Navigate down in Tampa, Florida, that has made its way onto the internet. We can also CIVO Bret Fisher. Let's see if we can find that one. Yeah, there we go. Real world container and image security. So this is not the best talk I've ever done. I'm just going to be honest right now. This talk was a rough draft, and it was mostly because I had just finished 3 weeks of having a severe flu. Not severe. I had the flu, didn't go to the hospital, so it wasn't severe. I had the flu and then COVID back to back, and then went to Tampa. And so my talk was not finished, but what I tried to do in this insane rapid fire talk was list all of the things that I recommend for supply chain security focused around containers and all the things in container land, as well as some in source code, some in GitHub, but everything that usually someone who's doing containers has to deal with. And I tried to rapid fire it basically to get you started in all the different things as a checklist. And I don't know. I think largely it was way too much information. It was sort of a vomiting of all the ideas I had. I'm not sure how it landed. I'm not sure if anyone used it, but it's over here on the CIVO page. Did I post that already? Yeah. So I put that link in chat. Go check that out. I don't have this stuff updated in a GitHub repo. I do have the GitHub repo, but it's not updated with all the recent stuff that I did in this talk. So if you're curious about 30 different things, literally, I think it's like 30 or 40 things that you can do to improve your supply chain security and just security in general on the road to deploying containers through Kubernetes and using, infrastructure as code and stuff like that. There's just a lot there. And I think sometimes the challenge with all this security stuff is that every talk tends to be a little bit of a deep dive into specific areas like Kubernetes, pod spec security, or specifying your from images and deciding which image is the most secure image to start from, or GitHub security on how to lock down your repo. Like, there's just a lot there. And I had a hard time finding a really solid list of maybe the top 30 or 40 things I, as a DevOps engineer, should do that maybe I'm not aware of. Like, we all know, obviously, two-factor authentication. We all know that you should probably not let everyone have write access to your Git repo. But that's obvious stuff. I felt like there was a lot of other stuff that wasn't so obvious. This also talks about things like Slim AI and the Docker Slim, or the Slim toolkit that the wonderful team over there at Slim AI is building, including someone who's maybe still on our show, Kyle over here, maker of the Slim toolkit. That's mentioned in there because that's another way you can help reduce vulnerabilities and lock down your images. So yeah, go check that out. And I'm going to check the chat for any last minute questions before I wrap this sucker up. I watched a YouTube video while streaming on my YouTube videos. That's right. That's right. You just come to this channel for me to show you more of my videos in a live stream. That's really what this is about. Developers are utilizing source control extensions so they could see Git changes immediately once we run service 1. Container starts with service 1 mounted. Now, in order for devs to see Git changes, they have to look in WSL. to look in WSL remote workspace. All right. That's a pretty... I'm not really grokking the challenge there. So this is what I'm going to recommend to you, Medium, is go up here, join the Discord server if you're not already in there, jump in... I don't know if you want to jump in the Docker channel maybe, or, because dev containers, you're maybe using those in containers. So either the Docker channel or the general channel. And if there's a whole community of people there, someone might have dealt specifically with your issue of a mono repo with dev containers dealing with the .git directory in your repo. That's a very specific challenge that I just haven't had to deal with. So if no one here in chat has the answer to that, jump over into the Discord server, sort of give as much detail as you can give, maybe not 5,000 words, but something that's really giving a good, and if you even have an example of a video, sometimes that really helps. It's just making a little example video of, hey, this is the problem I'm seeing. Has anyone seen this problem, or does anyone have an idea of how to get around it? There's people there that are always willing to help. I love that community for that. So not there. Go check out the Discord server. Oh, Kyle's still here. Yeah, you have an idea for automated way to vendor the containerized app dependencies to be good to chat about it. Yeah, I saw you chatting up the Dagger booth at KubeCon, so that was I was always curious what you all were talking about over there. Yeah, pick your poison, Zalt. Build date epochs. Yeah, okay. Thanks, Carlos. Talking about ChainGuard, a blog post from Matt Moore on designing build date epochs in ChainGuard images. They honestly, ChainGuard makes some great blog posts. I learn a lot, especially about stuff that I never have to care about, like the internals of how package managers build their packages or how they get injected into images. Like some of that stuff that they do there, it's just stuff that's beyond me. It's more advanced than I ever have to deal with. And it's cool to see how the sauce is made, right? Akshay, I will let Nirmal know that you miss him. He'll be back. He'll be back either next week or the week after. By the way, we have 2 special shows this month coming up in the next few weeks. If you're on my newsletter, Bret.news, if you're on that newsletter, you'll hear about it. But the next couple of live streams, we're going to have our end of year special. We're going to have Melissa, Docker Captain, on, and we're going to have some special guests, and we're going to talk about our favorite tech of 2023. We always do this every year in December. We're going to have it all Christmas themed up, and we're going to talk about our favorite tech and what we're looking forward to in 2023 in DevOps and in tech in general. And then at one of the last shows of the year, I'm going to have Michael Irwin, former Docker Captain, now helping run DevRel at Docker. He actually is a Docker employee. He's going to come back on the show. We did this last year. It's one of our best episodes of the year last year. And we're going to do a whole rundown of everything new in Docker in 2023. Everything that Docker shipped. And we're going to make sure that you're completely aware in 1 hour of anything you might have missed from DockerCon, from the Docker releases. They've had multiple, I think 2 or 3 major releases of the Docker engine. Of course, Docker desktops had tons of features and releases. So we're going to cover all that as best as we can in an hour later this month. And that's going to be on this live show. Cool. And thank you so much. Eric saying Melissa's awesome. Yeah, thumbs up for Melissa. Yeah, she was just at Black Hat. So we're going to probably get some news from Black Hat, and we're going to have some fun. So those are coming up. Let me give you the dates for those. Let me give you those dates. Let me just find my calendar here. All right, people. Next week, December 14th, come back for our special end of the year tech show. We're going to go through all of our favorites. We're going to have Melissa McKay, Docker Captain, on the show. We're going to have Nirmal back on the show. We're going to have Christmas themed everything because, it's Christmas for me. I put decorations up. Thanks, Beth. My wife put those decorations up today. And we're going to have a lot of fun. We do it every year. and we maybe have some trivia. And sometimes we have giveaways. I don't know if we're going to do giveaways next week or not. I'll have to think something up. So come back. That's the same time next week. Then we're going to have LiveCycle on the show on December 21st. LiveCycle is a platform for Kubernetes. You're going to have to check it out. And then Docker, Michael Irwin's going to be on December 28th. So the next 3 weeks are boom, 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 back-to-back container stuff that you can't miss. So Michael is so-so. I do what I can. Actually, Michael's a great friend. He actually lives hours from me, but we never see each other here in Virginia. We all have to go to DockerCon or KubeCon to see each other. Same with Eric. Even if I go to Texas a couple times a year like I do, I never get time to see Eric. So we have to go to conferences. I will see you next week. Come back. If between now and next week, go join the Discord server and then sign up below. You'll find the Bret.news newsletter link. The newsletter will keep you up to date on everything on the show, what's happening on the podcast, any new courses or free content I'm releasing, new GitHub examples, and all that stuff. And thanks for sticking with me almost 2 hours on this live stream. I will see you all next week on YouTube Live.